The gunshot echoed across the Han River like a crack of thunder splitting the Seoul night sky. Zara's body crumpled onto the wet asphalt of Mapo Bridge, her black evening gown blooming crimson as she collapsed. 30 meters below, the dark waters of the Han River churned, indifferent to the tragedy unfolding above. Kong Jae-won's scream tore through the night, primal, inhuman, the sound of a soul being ripped apart. He fought against the industrial chains binding his wrists, blood streaming down his arms as metal cut into flesh. He didn't feel the pain. All he saw was Zara, his Zara, lying motionless on the bridge where they'd shared their first kiss 6 months ago. Marcus Whitmore stood over her fallen body, custom Glock still smoking in his hand, a cold smile playing on his lips. Behind him, Jiun watched with something like satisfaction glittering in her eyes, her crimson Chanel suit a bloodstain against the night. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Marcus said, his American accent cutting through Jaewon's anguished cries. The exact moment a king becomes a beggar. But let's rewind. Let's go back 2 hours, to when they were still untouchable, still invincible, still breathing the same air without knowing it might be their last. The Lamborghini Aventador carved through Seoul's midnight streets like a shadow given form, its obsidian paint reflecting the neon glow of the city's insomnia. Inside, Zara had climbed over the center console, her black silk evening gown pooling around her knees as she straddled Jae-won in the driver's seat. The charity gala they'd just left felt like another lifetime ago. Her fingers traced the jagged scar running from his temple to his jawline, a memento from a childhood he rarely spoke about. His hair had grown longer over the past months, tied back loosely now, a few strands falling across his face. "Your hair," she whispered, switching between English and her accented Korean the way she always did when emotions ran high. "I didn't think you could get more beautiful, but apparently the universe loves proving me wrong." Jaewon's hands found her waist, thumbs drawing lazy circles against the silk. His obsidian eyes, usually so controlled and calculating, held nothing but raw vulnerability in this moment. "당신은 내 전부예요. He murmured. You are my everything." The car slowed to a stop at a red light, and Zara pulled back just enough to meet his gaze. Something had been building in her chest all evening, a pressure that demanded release. "Jae-won, I need you to know something." Her voice trembled slightly. "I have never loved anyone the way I love you. Not even close. Our hearts, they beat as one. If yours stops." She couldn't finish the sentence. A single tear escaped down Jaewon's sculpted cheek, catching the neon glow of a nearby restaurant sign. He switched to English, his accent thick with emotion. "내 사랑, I have never feared anything in my entire life. Men with guns, hostile takeovers, death threats. Nothing has ever made me afraid. But when I look at you..." His jaw clenched. "I fear the day I might lose you. Because I am darkness, Zara. I am shadows and violence and cold calculations. But you are light. You are warmth. You are every beautiful thing I don't deserve. Without you, I am just empty." Their foreheads touched as the light turned green. Neither noticed. In that suspended moment, they existed in their own universe, complete and perfect. The song playing through the car's speakers shifted, a fusion track mixing Afrobeats with Korean indie rock, their favorite. Zara laughed, settling back into the passenger seat as Jae-won accelerated onto the Han River Expressway. "솔직히 말해서," she said, grinning, "I still can't believe you convinced me to eat pepper soup at that fancy gala." The looks on those old Korean businessmen's faces when they saw the chili peppers. They needed culture. Jae-won's rare smile appeared, devastating in its beauty. "Besides, you said it reminded you of home." It did. Lagos feels so far away sometimes. But then you do things like that and she stopped mid-sentence, noticing the shift in his expression. Jaewon's eyes had flicked to the rearview mirror. Once. Twice. His hands had just slightly on the steering wheel, the relaxed posture from moments ago replaced by coiled tension. "Zara." His voice dropped to that dangerous calm she'd learned to recognize over their months together. "Sarang, put your seatbelt on." "No." She twisted in her seat, looking back through the Lamborghini's rear window. 2 black Mercedes SUVs were closing the distance fast, their headlights blazing like predator eyes in the darkness. "Baby, what's happening?" "Hold on tight." Jae-won downshifted, the engine roaring to life beneath them. "I think we have trouble." The speedometer climbed as they merged onto Mapo Bridge, the Han River flowing 30 meters below, its dark waters reflecting Seoul's endless lights. Zara gripped the dashboard, her heart hammering against her ribs as she caught a glimpse of the lead SUV's driver through the side mirror. The face she saw made ice flood her veins. "It's Marcus," she breathed. Jaewon's jaw clenched, his scarred face set in deadly focus. The Lamborghini was faster, more agile, but they were on a bridge, a cage with water below and limited escape routes. A third vehicle appeared ahead, cutting off their path forward. Metal shrieked as one SUV clipped their rear bumper. The Aventador spun, J1 fighting for control with surgical precision until they faced a wall of vehicles blocking the bridge completely. The car stopped. In the sudden silence, broken only by their ragged breathing and the distant hum of Seoul's nightlife, J1 turned to Zara. He cupped her face with both hands, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Fear. "Whatever happens," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "Don't be scared. Do you trust me?" "With my life," Zara whispered without hesitation. "That's my queen." He kissed her knuckles, his lips lingering against her skin. "그럼 같이 가자. Then let's go together." They stepped out into the cold Seoul night, fingers intertwined, facing whatever was coming as one. Marcus emerged from the lead vehicle, flanked by 6 armed men in tactical gear. The American businessman looked every bit the predator he was. Platinum Rolex catching the bridge lights, tailored suit immaculate despite the violence he'd orchestrated. Behind him, stepping out of a white Range Rover, was Ji-eun. The Korean socialite's beauty was sharp and calculated in her crimson suit, diamond earrings catching the light as she moved. Her eyes locked onto Jaewon with an intensity that spoke of years of obsession. "Ji-eun?" Jaewon's voice carried disbelief and disgust across the space between them. "You're working with him? After everything?" "Everything?" Ji-eun's composure cracked, her voice rising. "You never even saw me, Jaewon. 7 years I waited. 7 years of being the perfect Korean woman, the suitable match, the one your family approved of. I learned your favorite foods, your business strategies, everything about you. But you never looked my way. Not once." She stepped closer, her heels clicking against the asphalt. "Then this Nigerian woman appears out of nowhere and suddenly you're writing poetry with your eyes? Suddenly you're human? You smile? You laugh? For her?" Jaewon's voice dropped to that deadly quiet that made Seoul's underworld tremble. "She is not just a Nigerian woman. She is everything you'll never be, Ji-eun. She has a soul." Ji-eun's face twisted with rage, but before she could respond, Marcus laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "How touching. Really." He circled them like a predator assessing prey. "But I'm afraid this love story ends tonight." His men moved with military precision, and despite Jaewon's attempts to fight back, 4 of them wrestled him to his knees. Industrial chains appeared, the kind used for shipping containers, binding his arms behind his back with brutal efficiency. "Marcus." Jaewon's voice remained eerily calm even as blood trickled from his split lip, even as they forced him down. "It's me you want. Take me. My empire, my accounts, my properties. Everything is yours. Just let her go. Please." It was the first time Zara had ever heard him beg. Marcus crouched down to Jaewon's eye level, smiling. "Oh, I'll take all that. The ports, the tech divisions, the real estate, by sunrise, everything you built will be mine. But first..." He stood, pulling the custom Glock from his jacket. "First, I need you to understand something about loss." He turned toward Zara. Time slowed. Jaewon saw it happening frame by frame. Marcus's finger on the trigger, Zara's eyes widening in realization, the distance between them too great to cross. "No," Jaewon's voice cracked. "No. Marcus, don't." The gunshot exploded across the bridge like thunder announcing the apocalypse. Zara's body crumpled, the bullet hitting her chest with devastating precision. Her black dress bloomed crimson as she collapsed onto the cold asphalt, and the last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Jaewon's face, twisted in anguish, tears streaming down his cheeks. The sound that ripped from Jaewon's throat wasn't human. It was primal, something ancient and broken, every nightmare and fear he'd ever suppressed erupting at once. He fought against the chains with superhuman strength, his wrists bleeding freely as metal cut deep into flesh. He didn't feel it. Couldn't feel anything except the sight of Zara lying motionless. "Zara." He screamed her name over and over, each repetition more desperate than the last. "Sarange, please, please." Marcus watched with clinical detachment, as if observing an interesting experiment. Perfect. The exact moment a king realizes he's just a man after all. Ji-eun approached Jaewon from behind, something almost like regret flickering across her features. "I'm sorry it had to be this way," she whispered, before swinging a metal rod across his temple. The world exploded in stars and agony. Through the haze of pain, Jaewon felt himself being lifted, the chains impossibly heavy against his battered body. His last conscious thought was of Zara's face, the way she'd traced his scar just minutes ago in the car, the way she'd said his name in Korean for the first time. Then he was falling. The Han River swallowed him whole, the impact like hitting concrete. The chains dragged him down immediately. 15 meters, 20 meters, the surface becoming a distant shimmer of city lights above. The cold water shocked his system back to consciousness, and survival instincts kicked in despite everything. Years of training, of swimming, of refusing to die took over. Jaewon twisted in the water, fighting against the chains even as his lungs began to burn. He pulled, muscles screaming in protest, and felt one chain snap, then another. But he'd sunk too deep. 30 meters down, maybe more. His body, already battered from the beating, had nothing left to give. Even as he kicked toward the surface, toward air, toward the possibility of somehow saving Zara, his muscles gave out. Water filled his lungs. The scar on his face felt like it was on fire. In his fading consciousness, he saw her smile, heard her laugh, felt her fingers tracing his scar. "I'm sorry, my love," he thought as darkness claimed him. "I couldn't protect you." Kong Jae-won, the untouchable king of Seoul's underworld, floated lifeless in the river's embrace, his scarred face pale in the murky water. Consciousness returned in fragments. White ceiling. Antiseptic smell. The steady beep of medical equipment. Jaewon's eyes snapped open and he immediately tried to sit up, his hand reaching for a weapon that wasn't there, every instinct screaming danger. "Easy, son." The voice spoke in Korean, aged but commanding. "You're safe." Jaewon's head whipped toward the speaker, and his blood turned to ice. The man sitting beside the hospital bed was in his 60s, distinguished in an expensive hanbok, with eyes identical to Jaewon's own and a scar pattern eerily similar running down his left cheek. "You're dead," Jaewon croaked, his throat raw from river water and near drowning. "You died when I was 12. Car accident on the Gyeongbu Expressway. I attended your funeral, I saw." "You attended a funeral, yes." The man, Kongding, smiled without warmth. "But not mine. A body was necessary for authenticity. I've been watching you, Jaewon. For 20 years. I've watched you build yourself from that scared boy into this." He gestured at his son with something like pride. "Everything you accomplished, I saw it all." Jaewon tried to process this, but only one thing mattered. "Zara." He attempted to stand, for lines pulling at his arms. "I need to find her. She was shot. I have to get to her. I have to." "Your woman is dead, son." Dae-young's voice was clinical, detached. "I'm sorry, but the bullet pierced her heart. She died on the bridge before the ambulance could arrive." The machines around Jaewon went haywire as his heart rate spiked then crashed. A sound emerged from deep in his chest, not quite a scream, not quite a sob, something that embodied complete devastation. His hands clutched at the hospital sheets, knuckles white. "Kill me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Please, just kill me. I can't. Without her, I can't breathe. I can't exist, I can't." "You can and you will." Young stood, his presence filling the sterile room. "Listen to me carefully. The world thinks you're dead. Your car crashed into the Han River, your body never surfaced. The news has already moved on. Marcus Whitmore believes he won. Jian thinks she's free and clear. I don't care about any of that. You should care." For the first time, Dae-young's control slipped, his voice rising. "They killed the woman you loved and tried to destroy everything you built. Your empire is being carved up as we speak. And you want to what? Give up? Let them win? Let her death mean nothing?" Jaewon stared at the ceiling, tears tracking silently down his temples into his hair. His chest felt hollow, like someone had reached in and removed his heart, leaving only an empty cavity behind. "The son I raised," Dae-young caught himself. "The son I watched from afar, he doesn't surrender. He doesn't break. He becomes steel." He leaned closer. "You want to honor her memory? Then make them pay. Make them wish they'd never heard her name. Make them regret every breath they take." Something shifted in Jaewon's eyes. The grief didn't disappear, but it began to crystallize into something harder, colder, more dangerous. "I'll train you," Dae-young continued. "Make you into what I always knew you could be. Not just a businessman playing at power, but a real king. The kind men fear to even think against. The kind who doesn't just survive, he dominates." "And then?" Jaewon's voice was empty, hollow. Then you remind Soul what happens when you take everything from a man who has nothing left to lose. The next 6 months passed in a blur of violence and transformation. Jaewon moved through combat drills in his father's underground training facility like a machine possessed, his longer hair tied back, his body becoming lean and lethal. Each punch against the heavy bag was punctuated by memory. Her laugh. The way she sang off-key to Afrobeats in the car. How she'd trace his scar while they lay tangled in sheets. The exact shade of her brown skin in Soul's morning light. During the day, he trained until his knuckles bled and his muscles screamed. At night, he attended strategy meetings with his father's network of crime lords, politicians, and corporate sharks. He spoke rarely, but when he did, men twice his age listened with something like fear in their eyes. Seoul's underworld learned new names for him. The Ghost. The Drowned King. The man who'd survived the Han River's embrace and come back wrong, come back dangerous, come back empty of everything except the capacity for violence. But at night, when he thought no one could see, Jaewon would find the estate's pool. He'd float on his back, eyes closed, trying to recreate that moment of drowning. Because in that space between life and death, in that suspended moment before consciousness fled, he could almost see her face, almost hear her voice, almost feel her fingers tracing his scar one more time. 3 months into his resurrection, his father made an announcement over breakfast. "You need to remarry," Daeung said, not looking up from his newspaper. "For appearances. To consolidate power. The Han family's daughter, Sumin. She's educated, sophisticated, and her family controls half of Busan's ports. We need that alliance." No. Jaewon's voice was flat, emotionless. It wasn't a suggestion. Jaewon's eyes, once warm obsidian, now chips of ice, met his father's. "I said no. You will do this or everything I've built for you crumbles. Her family's shipping routes are essential for our operations. You will marry Han Sumin, or you can walk away from all of this right now." The wedding was a joyless affair. Traditional, expensive, attended by Seoul's elite who whispered behind their hands about the ghost finally taking a bride. Jaewon stood in his traditional hanbok like a statue, going through the motions with mechanical precision. Han Sumin was beautiful in the classical Korean way, delicate features and graceful movements, eyes that held hidden depths. She was 26, educated at Oxford, fluent in 5 languages. And she was desperately, hopelessly in love with the ghost who'd become her husband. Their wedding night, Jaewon didn't return to their shared quarters until 3 in the morning. Sumin sat in the heated Ondal room wearing traditional hanbok pajamas, listening to his footsteps approach down the hallway, pause outside their door, then retreat to the guest wing. This became their routine. Days passed into weeks. Jaewon was polite when forced to interact with her, distant, always untouchable. He attended required family functions with her on his arm, came home late smelling of whiskey and violence, spoke in monosyllables when he spoke at all. Sumin tried everything. She learned to cook kimchi jjigae the way his childhood housekeeper used to make it. She left books she thought he'd enjoy on his desk. She attempted conversation about business, about art, about anything that might penetrate the ice. Nothing worked. "He doesn't even look at me," she confessed to her best friend over the phone one afternoon. "It's like living with a beautiful statue. He's here, but he's not present. It's like he died in that river and only his body came back." But Han Sumin was patient and observant. And she noticed things. She noticed how Jaewon never drank whiskey except on certain nights when he'd disappear to the penthouse bar. She noticed how he flinched, barely perceptibly, when someone mentioned Nigeria in conversation. She noticed how his hand would unconsciously touch his chest, over his heart, when he thought no one was watching, like he was checking if it still beat. 3 months into their arrangement, Sumin heard him return at 2 in the morning. But this time, there were other sounds accompanying his arrival. Heavy, uneven footsteps. Furniture scraping. The unmistakable sound of pain being suppressed through gritted teeth. She found him in the master bathroom, standing under the rainfall shower, still fully clothed. His white dress shirt was torn and splattered with blood, his suit pants soaked through. The water ran pink around his bare feet, swirling down the drain. "Jaewon," Sumin gasped from the doorway. "Leave." His voice was mechanical, empty of inflection. "You're hurt, let me." "I said leave." The sudden violence in his tone would have sent most people running. But Han Sumin hadn't gotten through Oxford's cutthroat academic environment and survived Seoul's elite society by being timid. She stepped into the shower, her silk nightgown immediately soaking through, her long black hair plastering to her face and neck. Jaewon's head snapped toward her, eyes wild and dangerous. What are you doing? Shut up and let me help you. For the first time in months, something like surprise crossed his features. Sumin reached up and began unbuttoning his ruined shirt, her fingers steady despite the trembling in her hands. When she pulled the fabric away, she revealed the ink-covered canvas of his torso. Traditional Korean dragons, intertwined with geometric patterns, covered his chest and ribs. But there, directly over his heart, was fresh ink, still healing. Words in elegant Korean script, Vanya, PJ1's light. Below it a date. The night on the bridge. Sumin's hands trembled as she gently cleaned the blood from his knuckles. They were split and bruised, the kind of damage that came from beating someone, or something, without restraint. Her name was Zara. Jaewon's voice cracked suddenly, the first real emotion she'd heard from him. She used to say my scar made me look like a warrior poet. I thought she was crazy for seeing beauty in something so ugly. A bitter laugh escaped him. She loved Puff Puff and Suya more than any expensive restaurant I took her to. She'd sing off-key to Afrobeats in the car and didn't care who heard. She traced my scar the night He couldn't finish. His legs gave out. Sumin caught him as he sank to the shower floor, this powerful, terrifying man she'd married, and held him as he finally broke. 6 months of carefully constructed walls crumbling all at once. I can still feel her. He sobbed into Sumin's shoulder, his carefully maintained control shattering completely. When I close my eyes, she's there. Her laugh, her voice, the way she said my name in Korean with that accent. I can't kiss anyone else. Can't hold anyone else. Can't even look at anyone else because all I feel is her ghost. Sumin held him tighter, her own tears mixing with the shower water streaming over them both. I know, she whispered. I know you don't love me. I've always known. But Jaewon, you don't have to carry this alone. I can't replace her, I'm not trying to. But you don't have to drown by yourself. Something shifted between them that night under the shower's rainfall. Not romance, never that. But understanding. Alliance. Perhaps even the beginnings of friendship forged in shared loneliness. 2 weeks later, Jaewon had Marcus exactly where he'd wanted him for 6 months. The abandoned warehouse sat on the banks of the Han River, the same stretch of water where it had all begun. Rain pounded against the corrugated metal roof, thunder shaking the structure's foundations. Marcus was tied to a chair, his pretty boy American face already swelling from the conversation they'd been having. But Jaewon was just getting started. In his hand, he held a Sig Sauer P226, the same model Marcus had used on Zara. You know what's funny? Jaewon circled him slowly, predator assessing prey. I used to think revenge would be complicated. That I'd need elaborate plans, psychological torture, months of making you suffer. He pressed the gun barrel to Marcus's temple. But it's actually quite simple. 1 bullet. Same as you gave her. Jaewon, wait, please. Marcus's usual confidence had evaporated into pure terror. I can give you information, connections, money. Wait. Jaewon's laugh was devoid of any humor. Did you let her wait? Did you give her a chance to beg? To bargain for her life? OPPA, stop. The voice cut through the warehouse like a blade. Jaewon's head whipped around to see Sumin standing in the doorway, rain-soaked and breathless, like she'd run the entire way from the estate. Sumin? What are you doing here? How did you even? Please. She stepped closer, hands raised, palms out. Please don't kill him. You don't understand what he took from me. He's my stepbrother. The words exploded from her, desperate and raw. Marcus Whitmore. His mother married my father when I was 8 years old. He's terrible and selfish, and I know what he did was unforgivable, but he's the only family I have left. Please. Jaewon stared at her like she'd spoken an alien language. The gun trembled in his hand, his finger tight on the trigger. You know what he took from me, he said quietly, which was somehow more terrifying than shouting. You held me while I broke in that shower. You saw the tattoo over my heart. And now you ask me to spare him? I'm not asking you to forgive him, Sumin interrupted, taking another step forward. I'm asking you to be better than your pain. To be the man she fell in love with, not the monster your father is trying to create. She's dead because of him. And killing him won't bring her back. Sumin's voice broke. It won't heal you. It won't make the pain stop. It will just make you into exactly what your father wants, a killer with nothing left inside. The warehouse fell silent except for the rain and their breathing. Jaewon's hand shook violently now, the gun wavering. Besides, Sumin's voice dropped, carrying a weight that made the air shift. If you kill him now, You'll never know the truth. What truth? Jaewon's voice was barely a whisper. Sumin's eyes met his, steady and certain, carrying a hope so dangerous it was almost cruel. Zara is alive. Time stopped. The gun clattered to the concrete floor. Jaewon's world tilted on its axis. Everything he'd built over 6 months, every wall, every defense, every carefully constructed piece of armor cracking apart. What did you just say? She's alive, Jaewon. Ask your father. Ask Kang Dae-young why he paid the hospital staff to lie, why he falsified death certificates, why he showed you a closed casket at a funeral that never happened. The warehouse spun around him. 6 months. 6 months of training himself to become a monster. 6 months of drowning in grief every night. 6 months of turning himself into exactly what his father wanted. And it was all built on a lie. Where is she? His voice was barely human, raw with desperate hope and rage. Hansung Fortress. The private medical facility in the mountains. She's been there the whole time recovering. She was unconscious for months, but Jaewon, she's awake now. She's alive and she's been asking for you. Jaewon didn't wait to hear more. He was already moving, running through the rain to his car, leaving Marcus tied and forgotten, leaving everything behind except the possibility that she was breathing, that her heart was still beating, that maybe, impossibly, he could have her back. The drive to his father's estate was a blur of rain and rage. Jaewon stormed through the front entrance, knocking aside guards who'd once feared him and now were terrified of him. He found Dae-young in his study, calmly pouring aged whiskey as if he'd been expecting this confrontation. Where is she? Jaewon's voice shook the rafters, made the windows rattle in their frames. Young didn't even look up from his drink. Ah, Sumin told you. I knew she would eventually. Too soft, that girl. Too emotional. Where is she? Hansung Fortress, as your wife said. Young finally met his son's eyes with that same cold calculation. She's been recovering quite nicely. Physically, at least. The psychological trauma of waking up to find you supposedly dead has been harder on her. Jaewon's hands clenched into fists, every muscle in his body coiled with barely restrained violence. You let me believe for 6 months. You watched me break, watched me turn into a monster, and you let me think she was dead. How could you? I did what was necessary. Dae-young slammed his glass down on the mahogany desk. That woman makes you weak. I watched you build an empire, become untouchable, feared across all of Seoul. And then she appears and suddenly you're writing poetry and making yourself vulnerable. You needed to remember what you really are, what our family has always been. Our family? Jaewon's laugh was broken glass and bleeding wounds. You abandoned me at 12 years old. Faked your own death. Let me grow up alone, scared, wondering what I'd done wrong to make my father leave. And now you want to lecture me about family? I made you strong. I made you into someone who could survive this world. You made me a monster. Jaewon's voice cracked. And the worst part? I became exactly what you wanted. I stopped feeling. I stopped caring about anything. I turned into the kind of man who could put a gun to someone's head without hesitation. Is that what you wanted, father? Is that the son you're proud of? Dae-young's expression didn't change, didn't soften. Yes, that is exactly what I wanted. What I needed you to become. The single word hung between them like a death sentence. Jaewon stared at his father, really seeing him for the first time. Not as the man he'd mourned for 20 years. Not as the ghost who'd returned to save him. But as he truly was. Cold. Manipulative. Empty. You're dead to me, Jaewon said quietly, each word deliberate and final. He turned toward the door. If you go to her, Jim called after him, his voice carrying a warning. I will disown you. Cut you off from everything. The empire, the connections, the protection, all of it gone. Jaewon paused at the threshold, his scarred profile illuminated by the study's lamplight. He didn't turn around. Then I'll build a new empire. One where love isn't weakness. One where I choose my own path instead of following yours. He walked out into the rain without looking back, leaving his father standing alone in that study, surrounded by all the power in the world and none of the things that made life worth living. Hansung Fortress was a private medical facility hidden in the mountains outside Seoul. The kind of place where politicians and criminals went to disappear, to recover from things the public could never know about. Jaewon's Mercedes screeched to a stop outside the main gates, tires smoking from how hard he'd pushed the vehicle. His father's men were already there, forming a perimeter around the entrance. 20 of them at least, all armed, all with orders to keep him out. Jaewon stepped out into the pouring rain. His longer hair was immediately plastered to his face, the scar on his cheek visible even in the darkness. He didn't care about the rain, didn't care about the guns, didn't care about anything except getting to her. "Let me through," he said calmly, walking toward the gates. "Sir, we have orders from Kong Daeum." "I don't care about his orders. Let me through." "No, we can't do that. Please turn around and—" "I said let me through." The raw emotion in his voice made even hardened killers step back, but they didn't lower their weapons. Red laser sights appeared on his chest, 5, then 10, then 15 dots like deadly constellations mapping his heart, his head, his body. J1 kept walking, one foot in front of the other, closer to the gates, closer to her. The laser sights tracked his movement, but he didn't stop, didn't slow, didn't show any fear because what was death to a man who'd already drowned? "Sir, please stop or we will be forced to." Then she appeared. Through the fortress entrance, moving like a dream-given form, came Zara. She wore simple medical scrubs that someone had given her hair natural and wild the way he remembered from lazy Sunday mornings. Her brown skin seemed to glow even in the rain, and there was a scar now, visible above the scrub collar, a physical echo of what they'd both survived. Their eyes met across the courtyard. Every atom in the universe seemed to hold its breath. 6 months of grief, rage, transformation, and pain crystallized into a single moment of recognition. She was alive. She was here. She was real. Teona. Her voice carried across the rain, using his Korean name the way she had on the bridge, and it shattered whatever remained of his composure. They moved at the same time, running through the rain, laser sights tracking but not firing, guards watching but not interfering because what they were witnessing transcended violence, transcended orders, transcended everything they understood about the cold world they inhabited. They collided in the center of the courtyard like galaxies crashing together. J1 pulled her against him with desperate strength, his hands framing her face, touching her shoulders, her arms, confirming she was solid, real, alive here. "You're alive," he sobbed in Korean, then English, then Korean again, words tumbling over each other. You're alive, I thought I lost you. I thought you were gone. 6 months, I thought." "I know." Zara's tears mixed with rain streaming down her face. "I know, baby, I know. I'm here. I'm right here." And then they were kissing, not gentle, not careful, but with the desperate hunger of two people who'd been torn apart by death itself and refused to stay separated. Thunder cracked overhead as if the sky itself was applauding their reunion. The rain fell harder, soaking them both, the guards, the ground. But no one moved to stop them. No one fired their weapons. Because what they were witnessing wasn't just love. It was something inexplicable, something that made hardened killers lower their guns and remember that they too had once felt things beyond blood and money and power. J1 and Zara kissed in the rain as thunder provided percussion, and lightning illuminated them like a painting come to life. When they finally broke apart, not pulling away but just breathing the same air, he pressed his forehead to hers, his hands still cradling her face like she might disappear if he let go. "I became a monster without you," he whispered against her lips. "Then I'll love the monster back into a man," Zara replied, her hands reaching up to trace his scar the way she had 6 months ago, in another lifetime, in the Lamborghini before their world exploded. "I have a wife now," he admitted, the words tasting like ash. "My father forced an arrangement. I didn't want to. I never touched her, but legally." "I know. Sumin told me everything when she visited." Zara smiled through her tears. "She's a good person, J1. She saved you when I couldn't. She kept you human when you were drowning." "There's only you," J1 said fiercely, his fingers tangling in her hair. "There will only ever be you. My heart stopped beating when I thought you died, and it only started again this moment, right now, with you in my arms." Lightning split the sky above them, illuminating the entire courtyard in white-blue brilliance. Behind them, unseen by the couple lost in their reunion, Kang Daeum watched from the fortress windows, his expression unreadable as he observed his son choosing love over power. Behind J1, standing just outside the gates, Sumin watched with tears streaming down her face. She cried for reasons she couldn't quite name. Grief for the love she'd never have with the man she'd married, joy for the miracle she was witnessing, relief that the broken man she'd tried to save had finally found his missing piece. Somewhere in Seoul, Marcus remained tied in that warehouse, forgotten in the chaos. Jian was boarding a flight to Paris, running from consequences she couldn't face. The empire J1 had built was crumbling, the connections severing, the power structure his father had promised evaporating. None of it mattered. In that courtyard, drenched in rain and miracle, Two souls that death itself couldn't separate had found each other again. And in finding each other, they'd found something more important than power or revenge or any empire built on darkness. They'd found their way home. 3 months later, Jaewon and Zara sat on a modest balcony in Itaewon, Seoul's international district, sharing suya and watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Jaewon had cut his ties with his father completely, walked away from the empire, the connections, all of it. They'd started over in this small apartment, rebuilding their lives from scratch. Sumin had gotten an amicable divorce, taking nothing she hadn't earned herself through her own family's business. Surprisingly, she'd become one of Zara's closest friends, the two women bonding over their shared experience of loving and losing and fighting their way back to themselves. Marcus was serving 15 years for conspiracy and attempted murder. The evidence Jaewon had gathered over 6 months of planning had been enough to put him away without needing to pull a trigger. "Do you regret it?" Zara asked, her head resting on Jaewon's shoulder as the Seoul sunset deepened. "Giving it all up? The power, the money, the empire?" Jaewon traced the scar over her heart, the twin to his own, both of them marked by what they'd survived. "I gave up an empire," he said softly, "but I gained the universe." She turned to kiss him, and in the golden Seoul sunset, surrounded by the smell of spices and the sound of the city coming alive for the night, they proved that some loves really are worth drowning for. Worth dying for. Worth walking away from everything for. Because the best loves? They teach you how to breathe underwater. They show you that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what truly matters. They prove that death isn't the end of the story, just the middle chapter before the real beginning. Jaewon pulled her closer, his fingers intertwining with hers, both of them bearing scars that would never fully fade. But scars were just proof that they'd survived. That they'd fought their way back to each other through grief and lies and transformation. "Sarange," he whispered against her hair. "I love you too," she replied in English, then added in Korean, "Oni. Forever." Thunder rumbled in the distance, a reminder of that night on the bridge, that moment in the rain when they'd found each other again. But this time, the thunder sounded less like an ending and more like applause. The city of Seoul spread out before them, millions of lights beginning to twinkle as darkness fell. Somewhere in that vast urban sprawl, people were making deals and breaking promises, building empires and tearing them down, choosing power over love and believing they were winning. But here, on this modest balcony, with suya cooling on a plate and the sunset fading into night, Zara and Jaewon knew the truth. Real power wasn't in the empire you built or the fear you commanded. Real power was in choosing love when the whole world told you to choose revenge. In choosing to rebuild when walking away would be easier. In choosing to breathe underwater instead of drowning. They sat together as the first stars appeared, two people who'd been torn apart by violence and lies, brought back together by truth and the kind of love that refused to die even when everything said it should. And in that moment, they were infinite. If this story touched your soul, if you felt every moment of Zara and Jaewon's journey, hit that subscribe button and drop a heart in the comments. Share this with someone who believes in second chances and love that defies death itself. Because their story isn't over yet. Part 3 is coming, and you won't want to miss what happens when they face the one enemy neither of them saw coming. Jaewon's past, and the secret his father kept buried for 20 years. Subscribe now and turn on notifications because this is just the beginning.